First, every voice matters. Secondly, it's also about enhancing decision making. Thirdly, language accessibility. And finally, it's also about customer-centric approach.
Hello everyone, thank you for joining us for today's session. We're covering conferencing solutions for courtrooms. My name is Wesley Sutliff. I am a senior technical sales consultant in the US for Televic, and very excited to be talking today about everything we've been learning from courts. Now, mind you, I will say up front, a lot of the information that I will cover today is a little bit US and North American centric. I want to recognize that the judicial system throughout the world can be unique. I'll try to touch on really global points in terms of design considerations and requirements. But ultimately, what we want to do is define our use case for courts. We want to talk about the frameworks for different courts. We want to talk about the different challenges and requirements of courts, comparing large and small or specialized recording solutions. You'll hear me talk about that a lot today. But if you're in other parts of the world, thank you so much for being here with us today. I encourage all of you to reach out to your regional Televic contact and speak to them about courts. Let's look at opportunities together. Let's learn from each other. That being said, before I go too far down the road, I do want to point out that you can find this webinar after the fact and also find all of our previous recordings at televic.com/conference. You'll find underneath the support tab a section for webinars. So you will find this one there after we're finished. And then also all of the other ones that we've done in the past. So I encourage you to take a look. This is roughly 30 minutes. I may go over a little bit as I tend to get excited about this content, but I do want you to pay attention. So throughout this session, we will have questions to keep you engaged, and that is your chance to enter and win a $40 US gift card. So do pay attention, do participate. Also, while we're going through this, feel free to drop questions into the chat. We have my colleagues standing by to answer as best they can, or at least take down that information and share with our colleagues and get back to you. Okay, let's dive in. I want to talk about the challenges and requirements for courts. Again, speaking generally, there's a few areas that we want to cover today. Towards the end, I'm going to talk about temporary setups, mobile courtrooms. I want to talk about hybrid. You'll hear me throughout this presentation talk about the need and the existence of hybrid hearing, how that is going to be staying with us, and courts need to get a technology lift in order to support that well. We're post-pandemic, thankfully, and we now have a chance to take a breath and explore the right solutions to have hybrid hearing. Televic is proud to be part of the National Center for State Courts here in the US and be part of their hybrid hearing initiative. If you don't know, recording absolutely required within the court. In fact, it drives most of the technology requirements up until the hybrid initiatives, so that you could capture the audio, capture the proceedings, and record that. We'll talk a little bit about the unique recording requirements for courts and how they can differ sometimes and how we're addressing that. But also really just bad acoustics. Like everything we do here at Televic, it's about overcoming these acoustic challenges by providing high fidelity audio using our mic and our onboard loudspeaker. So just not so much, well, in addition to meeting the recording requirements, we want people to be able to hear each other. Whether there's a large gallery or not, whether there's a jury or not, people need to be able to hear and comprehend each other. So we're going to cover all of that. And I also want to make sure that we really define these different court types. So just a little bit about legal framework. Trust me, I'm not going to go into huge detail here, but I did want to point out kind of the differences and how it comes to recording and such. So common law, civil law, whether there's a codified written document as within civil law, or like common law, we're really using precedents and previous cases, previous rulings to determine what will happen after the proceedings. And in civil law, the recording is more about reference, whereas in common law, because so much is dependent upon what happened in the proceedings, in the case, the scrutiny of the recording for common law is much higher. And oftentimes, specifically here in the US at least, we need individual channel recordings for the different roles within the proceedings: judge, witness, prosecution, defense, so on and so forth. And they have to be clean, intelligible audio signals that are guaranteed to be appearing on isolated tracks for a third-party recording solution. So I'll be talking about that throughout, but really just a brief introduction as to why. All right, let's get to the fun stuff. So different courtrooms, large, small, what do I mean? The obvious, of course, being the actual physical size and the acoustic environments, but more so, you'll hear me talk about that while large courts, they'll have bigger audiences, they'll have multiple justices or judges. They tend to be in historic buildings, like the one pictured here. You're not going to put up a bunch of flat screens in this room. And then smaller courts, yes, smaller, but more so that they have fewer speaking positions, so less people are in the room. The acoustics may not be better, but the physical space of which to provide amplified sound is smaller. And often there's more of them, so you need to scale. So we'll talk about more of those differences, but these are the two main areas. And then again, I'll talk about mobile courts a little bit later. Let's jump in with the large courtrooms. So with large courtrooms, it's a panel of justices. So seen here is one of the U.S. states' Supreme Courts. So those are the state Supreme Court justices that would sit there at the panel. This is an older photo. They have new Televic technology, but I didn't have a fresh picture of it. Apologies. And just like any panel, any city or county or school board, a big conference event where there's a panel, it's difficult to hear each other. If you're on the far left, how do you hear the person on the far right without just blasting the room with full PA? So all these considerations, being able to hear each other. But also there's a big gallery, so there's more people at the back. There could be press. These are typically prominent spaces. We mentioned the historical buildings where you're going to put different things. In fact, I can tell you in those bookcases that you can see, they've now hidden little cameras in there to help with the hybrid initiative. But oftentimes you can't see them. They're not pictured here, so don't look. It's not a Where's Waldo. And the big thing is that everyone has to hear each other. We need that sound reinforcement. And again, you've got to be hybrid ready, always. So what do we do? Well, for this situation, Televic, our Plixus, our mature system, the Flex, the UniCOS, I'll talk about UniCOS in a moment, because what we're offering is hands-free with push to mute. Again, if you're talking about recording being so important, capturing every word, except when you are not supposed to, in which the case you have the push to mute. But judges don't want to worry about did they toggle their mic on or off at the appropriate time? They want to assume that the mic is live, capturing what they're saying, unless they specifically push to mute because they need to confer with the client, or whatever the appropriate use case would be. But if you're, having a much bigger discussion with a panel, imagine you're staring at those justices, who's speaking to me? So that LED indicator for the active speaker is so incredibly helpful in quickly identifying who's speaking to you. You can look at them, you can make eye contact, present yourself, and help yourself with your case. So it's just easier to understand what's happening within the space. That's something that we heard from on that state Supreme Court. But then we also have the Dante audio routing. It's mentioned here down at the bottom with the integration capabilities, DSP mode audio routing. What's so important, again, we talked about isolating the audio tracks for the recording, but with hybrid as well, what's going to the far end, what's coming back from the far end. We're using on our Plexus a full 64 by 64 Brooklyn 2 card from Audinate. So the idea is it's going right into the DSP. Again, these are bigger spaces, they have bigger budgets. They're going to have more AV technology. They're going to have dedicated AV IT teams of which to support them. Because again, very prominent spaces. This stuff just has to work. So we're using all the capabilities that you might find in our other use cases, but really focused here for sound reinforcement, for hybrid, for recording. And again, that's the idea using the DSP. Before I leave this slide, I will mention API. I won't talk about it much in this presentation, but I do want you to know that all the systems that we'll go through have a public API. We've got a variety of control systems that already have applications that you can start with, but you can always work with Televic to help build out any API calls, signals that you need. So how does this all connect? Well, one thing I'll point out, it's got the closed loop, but you don't need to have a closed loop. We always think that it's a good benefit, but we know that within courts, especially with historical spaces, you may not have the cabling ability to do a closed loop. You don't have to, but it is there as a possibility. I'm not going to talk about interpretation too much in this presentation. I think interpretation for the courts could be its own session. So I may bring it up once or twice throughout, but I'm not going to get into any specific detail. What I really want you to kind of notice here in this diagram is the blue line there is the networked audio over to the DSP. I know there's some cameras over there on the left. Don't worry about that. I do want to briefly mention multimedia terminal before I move on, but for now, audio into the DSP. DSP is going to do its workhorse job. It's going to do all the processing. It's going to do all the routing in terms of getting audio to the recording PC, the multiple channels of audio. It's going to take audio to and from a house PA system, maybe a laptop for hybrid. It's going to bring that back and forth, again, all on the Dante network. So really just fits like a glove into these spaces so that you're getting the best quality audio for both recording, but also the proceedings. Now, quick thing about cameras, and I'm really interested, put into the chat your thoughts on this. I'm going to go back a slide. A couple slides, I guess. So with the multimedia terminal, the idea is hybrid. So you have this big historic space. Again, you're not putting these flat screens like a sports bar everywhere. How will the justices, how will counsel, defense, how will they see or be seen in these hybrid hearing sessions? So the idea is UniCOS can be that confidence monitor along with your mic and your loudspeaker. And again, low profile. So if you have nice PTZ cameras, broadcast cameras in the room, they're not in the way. They're not detracting from the proceedings. Let me know what you think about that. Is this overkill, or are we onto something here that can be really valuable? We'd love to hear your feedback just from your experiences around the world. Okay, quickly back through the diagram. And we're at poll number 1. So our colleagues will launch the poll right now. This is your first chance to interact and put yourself in an opportunity to win the $40 US gift card. Question 1. From the options below, what is design feature? Sorry about the grammar. What design feature does Televic offer for large courtrooms? I should say feature. Hands-free operation with push to mute. It's hybrid ready. Dante advanced audio routing to the DSP, or all of the above. Don't let my grammar give the answer away. So take a moment, fill that in. Note that this poll will remain open throughout the session. So if you need to come back to it. But for now, we will move on. Okay, let's talk about the small courtrooms now. Again, most obvious is that it is a physically smaller space. But the main thing is that there's a lot more of them. And it's got to be scalable. So whatever solutions go in here, they have to be scalable. There's so many of them. And they need to be simple, because while there are far more of the courtrooms, there's actually less of the AV personnel to manage them. So they need to be very straightforward and simple. They need to be scalable. And oftentimes, the budget, because there's so many of them, they don't have a big budget per space. So they have to be affordable. Simple, scalable, and affordable. These are really some of the big kind of global considerations I would say would match all over the world. Fewer speaking positions. I mentioned that at the top. Maybe there's a jury, maybe there's not. Again, I'm kind of bundling small courtroom as a smaller version of large, not to be too obvious. And then also hearing rooms where there isn't a jury. So the use cases are fairly simple. They still need recording. They still need to be able to hear each other. They might be a small space, but not everyone speaks as loudly as I do. And we want to know what they're saying. So sound reinforcement for the room. We want to be able to connect with hybrid. Again, hybrid still matters. Now, recording may or may not need isolated tracks, but in our solutions, we have that ability. So even if they do need isolated tracks for the recording, we have that ability. So let's take a look at the recommended solution. It's the D-Cerno AE. This, if you were fortunate enough to go and be a part of our product launch this year, if you've seen us at the trade shows recently, whether for Courts or the ISE or Infocom or any of the other large conferences that we attend, if you have had your hands on this, if you've been able to speak into these microphones and hear the quality, this is a huge jump for us, and it was really purpose-built for the courts. We made sure that we matched the requirements to be simple, scalable, and affordable. So let's talk about some of the main takeaways and unique selling points. Just like the big brother of the Plexus and the Flex systems, hands-free operation. It's got the mic speaker combo. You've got the push to mute. By the way, other operating modes as well, but these are really the popular ones that we're seeing. The LED indicator, who's speaking to me, closed loop, or could be direct depending upon cabling options. All the same as before, but what we're doing is making things simpler and less costly. One of the ways we do that is we have USB-C. So we have a one-to-one, one in, one out, and you can use that for connectivity to the hybrid session like Teams or Zoom. Just connect directly to the PC. Or we also have, we have a multi-channel USB-C, which is an 8x8, And that's for the recording. Again, most of these third-party recording solutions exist on a PC today as opposed to cassettes or other things from the past. And we want to be able to have a very simple, straightforward connection to that solution. Still have the API, still have the DSP mode for connection to a DSP, but there's a little bit differences between this version and the previous. So I want to talk about those connection points. So I want to note, again, could be a closed loop, doesn't have to be. But then we also have the single channel USB, like I mentioned. This can get out there to Teams or Zoom or WebEx or GoToMeet or BlueJean or any of these that exist today, but most often Teams or Zoom. Then we have the multi-channel for recording. Again, direct point-to-point connections. This could all be done without a DSP. Not that we're saying you should remove a DSP, but the idea here is just for these spots, like you can just have a direct connection. We have analog input and output for ceiling speakers, house self-powered speakers, but the DSP is very important, so we have that as well. So rather than paying Audinate the extra fee for the Dante connectivity, again, simple, scalable, and affordable. So we're lowering the cost. We're using the international standard of AES-67 to pass that savings on to you and to your courts. So you can still have digital I/O of audio to a DSP, and then DSP could route to these other spaces, to Zoom or to recording and so on. But now you've got choices, and really you can play around with the budget to see what the best solution would be for these smaller courtrooms and hearing rooms. Next question. Get in there, get your $40, get that chance to win. D-Cerno AE for courts has a unique audio I/O input output that makes it simple to connect to a PC for multi-channel recording. Which I/O is it? Dante, analog, USB-C multi-channel? Is it fiber optic? Take a moment, put your responses into the polls, which are open now. And remember, this will stay open, so you can come back to it. But let's move on. So now I want to talk about mobile courts. Let's look at the considerations. So obviously they're temporary. That's the whole point of a mobile courtroom. Often there are rural communities that don't have access to a courthouse. There are parts of the United States where you'd be traveling all day just to get to a courthouse. So in different counties, different jurisdictions, different provinces, there are mobile temporary solutions that can be deployed, set up, and then torn down. They need to be easy, they need to be quick, but they still need most of these requirements that are in the other spaces, including hybrid. So let's look at kind of setup. Now, this could be, say, a big just conference room, just set up for whatever needs. Maybe it's a library, maybe it's a town hall, but what needs to happen is it needs to switch over into a courtroom setup very quickly. Now, you could do this with the two systems we talked about already. You could do that with the UniCOS. I mean, we have military use cases where they deploy full, horseshoe or hollow square multimedia terminal setups. But that's pretty advanced. I mean, you could do this with wired flex. You could do this with the wired D-Cerno AE. We have travel cases and kits to do all of that. But in all of these regards, you'd be taping cables down to the floor. It's time consuming. It's extra effort, when in reality you have your specific requirements of connectivity for the different audio channels, for hybrid ready, and so forth. So what we're looking at is our wireless Go G4. I mean, the idea here is that we can use Wi-Fi 5 as a protocol for wireless communication and not need any cables to connect between the different devices. You still get your integrated speaker and microphone. We are working on, this is a 2025 release as a hands-free option. So not today, not at the time of this session, but already we're working on the steps. We'll be having several releases over the next few months that work our way towards a hands-free operation for the courts. There's going to be some limitations. We'll do a follow-up specifically on this to get into the details. But this is why I think this will be so powerful as a wireless alternative to the wired pieces, because it's going to be quick deployment. The Flex G4 has the 2 battery slots, each 12 hours, so you can do one 12-hour or two 12 hours. We have the charging smart charger. We have the access point with the Dante connectivity, so you can have Dante in and out of the device, really meeting all those same requirements, except that it all packs up into a road kit, and you can take that, deploy it very fast and easy setup, but still meet these needs. So whether it is a large court, a small court hearing room, or even a mobile court, Televic has solutions, because our focus is really just about having the highest quality audio and opening up for granular control on where you route that audio. It just makes it simple and straightforward, and it's elevating these court spaces so that people can just hear. Okay, let's go to our third and final question for the polls. What protocol does the Confidia G4 use for wireless communication between the devices? Is it dual phase quad shift key, infrared? Is it Wi-Fi 5? Is it DECT 6.0, which, by the way, if that's a US only, DECT is much broader frequency range than this, but again, sorry, US centric here. DECT 6.0 is this one. HTTPS, secure IP protocol. Which one is it that we use for Confidia G4? Okay, put in your responses into the poll. And I want to make sure I talk about these court recording solutions. Again, this is not a Televic court recording solution, but it is so critically important, the recording side, that there is an industry of solutions, of providers of court recording technology. And for Televic, it's very important for us to be working closely with these third-party partners so that we're ensuring that whether you're using the D-Cerno with the USB or you're using Dante traditionally through a DSP, our audio routing matrix will consistently match up with the third-party recording, and learning about different ways that we can be using our metadata to enhance their solutions. So if you know of recording solutions that you'd like to ensure that we're well connected with them, that we're testing and we can stand behind that partnership, throw them in the chat. Let us know who you're working with, who you are hearing out in your area of the world. We're adding to our list as we continue to work within the courts. Okay, I've got one more thing. I know that we are very close to my 30-minute promise, but this is pretty new, and I want to make sure we cover it. You may have heard about this next solution in other presentations for other use cases. And honestly, when we first brought this technology out, we hadn't even really considered the courts. But in presentations and at trade shows, we started getting approached by federal and state courts asking about this. And here's what they've been interested in. I'm talking about Unite for courtrooms. So how would this tour guide system work in a courtroom? Well, really, we found some interesting things out, and we continue to develop this. I'd love to hear in the chat what your thoughts are about these things. I'm not going to go into great detail. I'm obviously teasing out this a little bit. I'd like to work further on this and maybe do a more in-depth presentation. But I want to start with a couple of features that folks have been coming to us and talking to us about how this solution can work in the courts. So first off is what we would call full duplex. Really, it's a wireless presentation. So we are presenting. Unite has handheld microphones. We have body packs. We're able to set up our access point in full duplex where we have up to 4. Again, the limit would be 4. But we have the ability to go back and forth with the audio signal. So if you're using a DSP to manage those back and forth audio signals, we can do a couple of things with that. Most notably, hey, put a wireless spot at the podium. You can either hide a body pack and run an a microphone to it. The belt packs have a XLR connectivity, so you could hide one and just have a nicely tucked in wireless lectern. You obviously have the handheld or a body pack. You can present from the well rather than relying on a ceiling mic. Again, if you're in a historic space or the acoustics are bad, they don't lend themselves to nice overhead microphones, can still work there. Remote interpretation. This is something I'm going to tease you with. DSP absolutely required, but as we learn at Televic more about how remote interpretation is used with either a computer on a team, like multiple Teams calls, or a traditional VoIP line or things like this. Again, not whisper interpretation, but really routing the audio signals back and forth to specific groups. This is something that we're learning more about and developing, and are excited to go into greater detail in the future about how this can work within the courtroom. So a lot of very interesting things there. Lastly is the just language distribution and assisted listening. So we can go into full broadcast mode where we are taking, again, in both methods here, analog and Dante, and you can take audio signals to an AP4 and then distribute that out to multiple people. So this would be providing assisted listening to the courtroom, or even if you had members of the gallery who wanted to listen in a different language. I actually had worked in a previous life with courts who were looking at ways to distribute AI interpretation out to the gallery. So not for the proceedings, but for folks who wanted to come and observe and have different languages. This started to become a request that we would hear about. So in this mode, it's about distribution of audio only, but meets your assisted listening requirements and language distribution for the masses. Not private interpretation for the proceedings, but just general interpretation to the public. So these are just things that we're hearing about since the release of Unite this year. We're very excited to be learning more and to come back to this topic and dive deeper and be able to share all the exciting things we're learning about. All right, everyone, you have been so wonderful. Again, I thank you for your time. Thank you for participating in the polls. Make sure that you dropped in some answers so you get a chance to win. Again, after this, you'll be able to find this webinar and all of our previous webinars on our website under Conference Support and then Webinars. And by the way, if you haven't already, please do sign up on our social medias and stay informed. We not only have these webinars where you can learn all about us and what we're up to, but just in our regular posts in terms of successes, new features, questions, getting feedback from you. Use these QR codes or just sign up and follow us at Televic. Thank you all. Really appreciate it. Have a wonderful day. See you next time.
First, every voice matters. Secondly, it's also about enhancing decision making. Thirdly, language accessibility. And finally, it's also about customer-centric approach.